COVID hit in mid-March, my family and I left Brooklyn and came upstate to the Hudson Valley. Sometimes it's called the breadbasket of New York City. And with 6,000 farms, it's a good place to observe what's been our country's worst food crisis in a generation. But at the moment, I'm on my way back to Brooklyn, following a farm truck to Bay Ridge to see the local food supply chain in action. Some farmers call it the spring flush, the time on dairy farms in April when typically calves are born and their moms produce more milk. This year, it came at the same time as COVID. Enclosures to schools, large cafeterias, and dairy processors meant fewer places for this milk to go. You can't just shut off a cow, so many large dairy farmers were forced to do the unthinkable.
To find milk in some stores, and at the same time, some farmers around the country have had to dump their milk. David Summerstein of North Country Public.
According to some estimates, they had to dump almost 4 million gallons a day. I actually heard about this as I was headed to buy milk at Ronnie Brook Dairy Farm in Pine Plains, New York.
I was hearing about the dairies that were dumping milk. Did you guys have to do that?
So luckily for us, we're sort of in a different, from here to there, all our milk is used.
This is Dan Osofsky, one of Ronnie Brook's owners. He was pointing to the barn where the cows are milked, then to the facility across the road where everything is processed into a variety of products, including their signature glass jug milk.
So you guys didn't have to dump anything?
We had to dump nothing. I control my own destiny.
This was early April, and soon there were other stories of trouble at factory farms. Reports from the New York Times of a single chicken factory smashing 750,000 unhatched eggs a week, large hog farmers exterminating hundreds of thousands of pigs, and farmers elsewhere plowing fruits and vegetables back into the earth. All this while the country was growing anxious about finding and shopping for food. The pandemic hasn't been kind to factory farms with their rigid supply chains. But I began to wonder about local farms, ones like Ronnie Brook in the Hudson Valley, that supply the city farmers markets, farm-to-table restaurants, soup kitchens, and food co-ops. How are they doing during the pandemic? And as food security questions abound, where do they fit in the equation of how we get fed?
Okay, so he says 8 cc of the multi-min 90 and follow directions on the vitamin E.
Before COVID, local farmer Sean Stanton of North Plain Farm in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, relied on restaurants for 50% of his business. He produced beef, pork, chicken, and dairy for Blue Hill Farm Restaurant in Greenwich Village. That business disappeared in the middle of March, but his season started with an additional challenge, one that wasn't related to the pandemic.
I have a cow that's not feeling well, and so we're going to try and move her. She can't get up right now. She got up once and moved, but now I got to go get her some water, and then I got to try and get her up again. It could be so many things. It could be parasite overload, could be there's a cancer that older, especially beef cattle, can get. It's one of those things where you're like, am I going to just shoot this cow, or am I going to try and get her better?
North Plain has 90 head of beef cattle that feed on hay all winter and move to the grass in the spring. This is the day they head to the grass. They're eager to go, but it seems like they don't want to leave anyone behind.
There's a psychological challenge of losing animals. I mean, even sending them to slaughter has its own challenges. But there's also the financial challenge. I mean, the animal's worth $1,500 at least. Okay, what do you want to do? Let's go this way.
The animals are only worth money when they can be turned into food. The spread of COVID in large meatpacking plants has complicated that picture. It's boosted demand at smaller slaughterhouses, but there are fewer smaller facilities than ever. most have disappeared over the last 30 years, either gobbled up by a handful of giant corporations or put out of business by the rock-bottom prices they ushered in. Today, 4 companies process more than 80% of the beef in America. But North Plains family-run butcher east of Albany has stayed open. So these cows will eventually end up on someone's plate. Somewhere.
And the one that was down is on her feet and in the grass, so that's good scene. And the grass it's like gold for them. I mean, can change everything.
With their product intact, next came the question of how to bring it to market after their main retail outlets had to shut down.
Like March 15th, they closed. I think it was March 15th. And we just like hit the ground running. I mean, we weren't really scared, but we sort of knew what we needed to do. And the fact that we have a farm store, we're able to just turn right around and start selling direct to consumer. And that's the only thing that's saving us. I mean, it's not to say that it's going to save us long term, but it's been pretty amazing to see that also the consumer awareness. The consumers get that, you know, they're alternatives.
The alternative being local, more sustainably grown vegetables and animals with fewer antibiotics, growth hormones, chemical pesticides, or artificial fertilizers.
It's the moment where it's really coming to light that the industrial food system is so fragile.
By contrast, smaller farms have seen their stock rise, and in early spring, cash flow for many was reaching record highs.
And you wonder, when you're in our position, if it's possible that maybe it'll change consciousness and maybe it will change buying habits. And, you know, that's really that's the American way, right? Voting with your dollar.
Another way people have been voting with their dollars is with community-supported agriculture, or CSAs.
CSA farms are booked out this year, like for the first time ever for a lot of them.
Hardy Roots Farm near Hudson, New York has been running on the CSA model since its inception in 2004. A CSA is a farm where people can purchase shares to get regular deliveries of food. Their program currently feeds 1,200 families in the Hudson Valley in New York City. Daniel Woodham is their harvest leader.
Community-supported agriculture is now a sought-after thing.
This year you've seen more demand than ever in your experience?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. CSAs kind of came into the U.S. in late 70s, and they're sort of popular, some in the 90s, and I think was early 2000s. Oprah said something about a CSA, and then they spiked again. But I don't think they've ever been as popular as right now.
Ben Shute is the owner and operator of Hardy Roots Farm.
We were able to get this farm started from scratch on a very small scale because we decided to use the CSA model. Every spring we would sell our CSA shares and get payments from our members up front, which would enable us to literally take that money and buy the seeds for the season, buy our supplies.
He went from a 3/4 acre rental to owning 70 acres, farming about 50 different vegetables, with 75% of their business coming from the CSA, and a new farm store that accounts for much of the rest.
Our approach, which is this kind of community-focused approach, enabled us to get through, various wrenches thrown in the works with the pandemic. Every vegetable we're growing, we've managed to sell to a CSA share. It wasn't all dependent on one link in the chain. People were definitely made a little more aware of where their food is coming from or not coming from when they started to see grocery shelves empty or limitations on where they could shop and how they could shop.
The CSA relationship is unique. It's like paying for a personal grower who also happens to be thinking about your cooking habits and your salad.
All our plans for this season are based around our CSA. We say we're growing for this many families this year, then we plant our field according to that. We never want to have, just a ton of 2 different things, because that's not how people cook. People want a salad, and they want some roots, and they want some cooking greens, and some herbs. And so we carefully plan to make sure that we have all those different things every week of the season, starting on day 1.
There's a resiliency to these farms by design. They offer a range of products, they're small so they're versatile, and they're also built to be self-reliant.
Unfortunately, you can't reverse the track. That would be ideal.
Sean Stanton from North Plain Farm talked to me about this while he was trying to fix a stuck manure spreader stuffed with the winter bedding of their pigs and chickens.
We compost it, and then we use it for spreading on the pasture or whatever else we want compost for. The reality is you have to have fertilizer to grow vegetables for the most part, and there's different ways of doing that, and one of those ways is to have animals.
It's part of the biodynamic philosophy, a holistic process that's even more rigorous than organic farming.
It's a cycle, it's an ecosystem within a farm, and it has plants and animals, and humans are basically skimming off the top of everything.
But a push for productivity in the 1960s gave way to huge factory farms that would produce few things, and smaller, more sustainable farms, from the federal government's perspective, became an afterthought.
All in the name of efficiency. It's not actually efficient when you look at all the external costs that aren't calculated when you go to the grocery store. I mean, this isn't terribly efficient either.
It was May when people started talking about a meat shortage in the United States. It was more of a figment, but the talk came with a panic, boosting North Plains sales even further. Even though one of the main sources of their income, the farmers market, opened late and with restrictions.
Attendance is down, but this farmers market, we've seen almost double in customers for the past 3 years. This market's bonkers, and it's a beautiful market. Got the eggs, the sauerkraut, 24 total. The chops are, okay, the total is $133.78. It used to be sort of like our advertising budget, we would say, and now it's a huge part of our income. So we really hope that we can maintain some of that. We'll see.
The CSA model has been more predictable, and currently there are more than 120 in New York City. Hardy Roots is preparing for its second delivery of the season on Saturday to one of its oldest CSA partners, one in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn.
So we need 600. So that's the fourth one, I think. So if you want to keep a count, continue to do our 30s here.
When I wanted to do my own farm and rented a little bit of land, wanted to not only meet the needs right in our, town, but also to be bringing food down to New York City. And that seemed like an important service to be providing.
If you leaf like this, we got to take that off.
His farm also provides 2,200 pounds of fresh produce a week to city food pantries.
So we're going out in teams, picking bunches of greens and digging up roots.
All right, let's pack it.
And sending everything into the barn where we're washing it. Getting it all in great shape to then pack up into shares.
All right, so let's do David first. 107 shares.
This year, putting them all in boxes or bags for people so that people aren't having to touch bulk bins of vegetables at the pickup sites. And we get all that together, goes in the cooler overnight. First thing in the morning, for New York City, we're loading up the truck and sending that truck down to the city to drop off at our different neighborhood sites.
You saw me put the paperwork in the van, didn't you?
Despite the restaurant closures and restrictions, these trucks from the Hudson Valley have continued to roll down the interstate with their fresh produce, destined for grocery stores, food pantries, farmers markets, cafes, and CSAs. This food isn't cheap, but if cheap was the point, these farmers would be using different methods and producing fewer things. Still, the food can be affordable. Schutz says his CSA is less expensive than natural food stores, and some New Yorkers receive discounts when buying at city farmers markets. Prices could come down even more if farmers are able to own a larger part of the supply channel and secure more federal support, which right now goes mostly to large-scale agribusiness. The CSA Drop is at the 4th Avenue Presbyterian Church in Bay Ridge.
We're going to all stay on this side of the fence. Maybe Ron will be there to try to keep track of how we space apart our volunteers.
When describing the CSA, Shute recalled the words of an upstate member, an 80-year-old retired dairy farmer.
She had farmed her whole life. She knew how to grow every vegetable. Other people in the CSA would, call us a farm, and we called ourselves a farm. But she would always call it a garden because she saw what we were doing as gardening. And I think that there's something to that. We're kind of acting as a really big and efficient garden for 1,200 families who in many cases are in the city where they don't have access to land that they could have their own garden.
It's not surprising that smaller, local farms appear to be more resilient now during the pandemic. But it turns out this isn't something new. A 2015 U.S. Department of Agriculture study found that farms with direct-to-consumer sales were more likely to remain in business than those without. But the study found that they make up less than 8% of American farms.
Do you think people are appreciating the importance of, kind of local, small farm and...
Yeah, I think...
Yeah, people get it. They want to support it. We could have been completely devastated, but it turns out that our neighbors are knocking at our door and see the value in this type of farming for the environment, for community resiliency. They want to have local food. They don't want to get screwed. What if another pandemic comes in a couple of years? It's definitely not out of the question.
On the small list of good things to come out of the pandemic is that people are now thinking more about their food and where it comes from. The farmers in the Hudson Valley hope this trend will continue.
However you figure out that your food is connected to your health, is connected to your community, is connected to your environment, and make that a priority.